Pfizer says they will have results in October, and the president has said that there could be a vaccine approved before the election. What's the most realistic time frame for approval?
Well, I have said now multiple times over the last several months that the projection would be that by the end of November, December of this calendar year, that we would have an answer whether or not we have a safe and effective vaccine that's approvable. Is it possible that it could be before then? And the answer is yes. I think it's unlikely, but I think it's possible. And the possibility will be dictated by, for example, if you have the trial being taken place in an area that happens to have a lot of infections, you may get an answer sooner than you would have projected, because the answer is event-driven. It's not driven by the time of the trial or by the number of people in the trial. It's driven by the number of events or infections, as it were, that you have in the placebo group versus the experimental group. So again, my prediction is going to be November, December, but I would not be overly surprised if it happened before then.
That's approval. What about actual rollout of a vaccine?
Good point.
People getting it.
Good point. Right now, there are mechanisms in place to make doses of vaccines even before we know whether it works or not. And there are pre-orders and pre-purchases of vaccines on the part of the federal government. The way it looks like it'll play out, by the time we get to the end of the year, we will have a few to 10 millions of doses. We won't have hundreds of millions of doses. As we get into 2021, the beginning first quarter and half of the year, then you're talking about several tens, if not hundreds of millions of doses.
There's a surge of cases in the Midwest, colleges. This is something obviously everybody's concerned about. What should colleges be doing? Should they be sending students home?
No.
More testing? What should colleges be doing?
Well, colleges are doing different models. Some colleges are doing everything virtual and online, but that's not what many of the colleges are doing. Many of them are testing everybody before they even get on into the dorms, into the campus, and then doing surveillance intermittently. Sometimes that's a couple of times a week, sometimes that's a little bit more. But the important thing is to have the capability when a student gets infected, rather than close everything down or sending them home, to have either a dorm or a floor of a dorm where they could safely and comfortably segregate them from the rest of the students. But we are not recommending that they send an infected college student home, because what you're then doing is you're getting an infected person and putting them back in the community to spread infection. So the best thing you can do is to keep them on campus, segregated from the rest of the students, but not essentially telling them to go home.
The number of African-American medical students now is about the same as it was decades ago, especially men. How do you solve this problem, and how big a problem do you see that as?
Oh, it is a big problem. We've got to get more minority students into medical school and nursing schools, but certainly mostly medical schools. You want the medical staff throughout the country to reflect as much as possible what the demography of the country is. And we absolutely need more minority, particularly African-American medical students, and ultimately physicians.
In Russia, scientists are reporting the first results on their controversial COVID-19 vaccine. The Lancet Medical Journal claims the Sputnik V produced an antibody response in all participants in early-stage trials. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins me now. Dr. John, I love when you join us for these Facts Over Fear segments. Thanks for being with us. What do we know about Russia's vaccine?
So what we know is, like you said, that they've already approved their vaccine because of the results they got in the small trials. And they said 100% of the participants in these small trials actually had antibodies against coronavirus, and it seemed to be safe in them. But the caveat here is these were two different trials they did. Each trial had 38 participants. And so we're talking 74 total participants. I'm sorry, 76 participants. And on top of that, it wasn't placebo controlled. In other words, they didn't give some the vaccine and some the placebo to make sure they could contrast the two. Very, very small. So here in the U.S., we're waiting until we get at least most of the way through phase 3, which will be 30,000 participants in each one of these trials. When we get partway through those 30,000, then they'll start looking at the data to see if they can approve it for certain groups of people. So, in a lot of experts' opinion, Russia completely jump-started things. And the concern is we've had many drugs, we've had many vaccines that look great in phase 1, look great in phase 2. And Russia right now is essentially in phase 1. Don't do well in phase 3 and have issues in phase 3. And so the concern is, one, that it might have safety issues. And if it does, then people will start looking at it and start thinking, maybe I shouldn't get that vaccine, when in fact that vaccine has nothing to do with the vaccines that we have here in the U.S. and it will be authorized here in the U.S., Savannah.
Yeah, issues in phase 3, knowing that it's something that's going into your body, sounds like a pretty scary potential reality. Now, could this have any impact on the timing of a vaccine here in the U.S.?
I don't think it's going to have an impact on the timing here, because you just heard Dr. Fauci say that it looks like, the end of the year, beginning of next year is when more than likely we'll start looking at vaccines that are emergency use authorized. That'll only be for certain populations. And in those populations, these are the ones that are at highest risk for either contracting coronavirus or getting side effects or complications because of coronavirus. And then for the general population, either towards the end of the first quarter or the summer of next year. That is pretty much on the trajectory that we've been talking about since February. That shouldn't change based on the Russia experience right now, what Russia is talking about. The concern is we know there's a certain amount of vaccine hesitancy here. And so if news gets out that people are getting it in Russia and all of a sudden they start having side effects or issues, that could cause more vaccine hesitancy here. And that's what has the vaccine experts worried, Savannah.
Now, I want to ask you about a tough number we're hearing. A new prediction from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington says we could see 410,000 coronavirus deaths in the U.S. by January. Now, that's more than double the current death toll. And of course, we're already in September. What's behind that prediction?
So the prediction is looking at what they think might be happening come wintertime, especially when the virus we think will make an even stronger comeback. And people will start letting their guard down a little bit because we know cases are getting better under control right now. So they won't necessarily be doing the things that they've been doing all along to protect themselves and protect others. But you do have to remember, this is a prediction. And one of the things they have been criticized about, and this is the IHME prediction, is that they tend to go out very long term. Although right now they're predicting, if you look at their past prediction, they were predicting 200,000 deaths by October. We're at 180,000+ deaths now. So they're on track with that one. So they have a fairly good track record. But again, they're basically basing human behavior. And what they're saying is the most likely scenario would be exactly what you're talking about. But if we can get human behavior back to where we know the things that people need to do, and they do those things to keep themselves and everybody else protected, that number should be lower. So hopefully this is a bit of a warning signal for people saying, hey, we need to double down on the effort, Savannah.
Now, Dr. John, we heard from a TSA spokesperson. They tweeted that Checkpoint saw the highest number of passengers it's seen since mid-April. It was at nearly 878,000 people. What advice do you have for people who are starting to travel again, especially this Labor Day weekend? We might see a lot more of that. How can people stay safe?
And Savannah, you're right. The numbers are going up, and this is a big holiday weekend typically, and it's showing the same reflection now, even in the midst of the pandemic, because people simply want to travel. They want to go meet other people. They want to meet other friends and go to other places, but they have to remember to do things with safety in mind. And one thing we have found out, and we've certainly found out more about this virus over the months since it's shown up, is that air travel, the airplane section itself, doesn't seem to be as big of an issue as we thought or were worried that it might be, for a few reasons. One, because of the ventilation set up in the airplane. Two, because a lot of airlines are actually shutting down the middle aisles. They're making everybody wear masks. And three, people are simply just doing the things they need to do to protect themselves and others. There are some things you can do. Number one, if you're on the airplane, or the window seat, better than the aisle seat, because people aren't passing by as much. Make sure you wash your hands or sanitize your hands as much as you can during the flight. But more importantly, realize that the biggest risk comes in before you get on the airplane and after you get off the airplane, when you're around other people. And the concern from experts is not so much catching coronavirus on an airplane, but people having it and taking it to a different location and spreading it that way. So even when you get to your location, remember the 4 W's that we constantly talk about. Wear a mask, watch your distance, distance, wash your hands, and windows. Open up windows, ventilate, do things outdoors if you can. But the most important thing, Savannah, is just have fun this weekend.
Dr. John, I like those 4 W's, and thanks for some real tips on travel. Window seats better than aisle. Some helpful stuff to remember. Thank you so much, Dr. John. And you yourself, enjoy Labor Day.
I will. Thanks. Bye.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.